Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover, and I'm also joined by Desi here, who I'm pretty sure has just farted, so that's going to be lovely for me for this video. So I wanted to come on here today ahead of the Barkalong Readathon, which I'm hosting, which is taking place on November 20th to the 27th. I've already done a video explaining like what the readathon is about and some of the challenges, and I will leave that linked below and above for anyone who wants to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. So in this video I'm going to go through some dog book recommendations, both fiction and non-fiction, for anyone looking for any doggy books to read, as well as my own TBR for the upcoming readathon. So the first category I'm going to talk about and recommend some books on is the non-fiction category, and there's so many amazing dog books out there in the non-fiction genre, and I'm going to show you some of the ones that I've really enjoyed. So the first one I have to do is just a staple. If you're going to talk about dog books, you can't not mention this book because I feel like it's one of the ultimate doggy books out there, and that is Marley and Me by John Grogan. This is just a really well written, like lovable, funny, like really laugh out loud book of just a man's journey with his first dog. Let's get up to a lot of different adventures. The way he tells the different like stories with Marley and the antics that Marley got up to, it's just really well done. John Grogan was a journalist for a really long time. He wrote a column about Marley, so that's why things are so well documented, and they ended up being compiled into a really great book. Do have a box of tissues with you. Like, it is definitely a really emotional, hard-hitting book, as a lot of dog books tend to be. You will definitely cry during this one, so yeah, I definitely recommend it for anyone who is looking for a non-fiction book to read. And this is one that you might be able to find really easily from your library or like charity shops as well. There's always kind of like a Marley and Me book floating around somewhere because it's such a bestseller. Another one I'm going to talk about is Noel Fitzpatrick's Becoming the Super Vet, Listening to the Animals. Now this isn't specifically a dog book, but obviously Noel is a vet. He talks a lot about the animals he treats, and it seems to me like the majority of animals he does treat tend to be dogs. So he has just a lot of really nice stories around the different dogs that he has saved. This is just a really interesting like story about how he ended up becoming the revolutionary vet surgeon that he is, and the type of surgeries he does on animals. He does believe in something called one medicine. He really does believe that the type of medicine, like the bionic kind of limbs and all that kind of stuff that he is doing on animals, should be transferred, and that science, I guess, should be transferred then onto what can be done for humans. He's just a really interesting like guy. He's a really interesting story, and this does fit for like the challenge of read a book with a dog on the cover, because his dog Kira is on the cover, so it definitely suits for that. But yeah, this is definitely just a really interesting book. I definitely recommend. Another book I want to recommend is a book called Walking with Petey. This is actually a book I read during my first Barkalong Readathon a few years ago, and this is definitely one that pleasantly surprised me. This is about a man who is really struggling with his health. He is very overweight, he has some chronic illnesses, and he's really struggling. His mental health is really bad as well, and then he ends up adopting this dog called Petey from his local animal shelter, and with Petey comes this whole new way of life. Not only has he a real excuse to like go out in the morning, to go out walking and then eventually jogging, he ends up kind of getting this like lust for life back again. He ends up turning to a vegan diet, and that ends up like just being a real like lifesaver for him. And this is just him talking about those life changes and how Petey was the core of it, and his friendship and his bond with Petey, and it is just a really gorgeous book. I definitely recommend it for anyone to read. And then the last book I want to talk about is a book I actually read this year, and that's Arthur. This is a really interesting non-fiction book about a man who's kind of this, he's kind of like an athlete, but he does these kind of like ultra marathon challenges where like they're real almost like wilderness challenges, survival challenges, where he goes around the world competing in these type of challenges with different teams, and they basically have to they set off in one place and they have to use a range of different skills, such as like, you know, mapping, survival skills, you know, mountaineering, all the cycling, all these type of different skills to survive a certain amount of days. And the teams are obviously ranked first from last and all that, and there's timing issues and all this sort of stuff, but it goes on for a number of days. And we follow Michael as he and his team are participating in this type of challenge. I think it might be in Ecuador, somewhere in South America, and during this challenge they end up finding this stray dog who he names Arthur, and he ends up feeding Arthur, and Arthur tags along with them for the rest of the journey, and he becomes a little bit of like a media darling once cameras realised what was happening and that this dog was following this team. And Michael documents his journey into trying to adopt Arthur and getting Arthur from South America back to his homeland in Sweden, and the difficulty that that entailed, and then also how Arthur, who was a stray dog for probably most of his life on the streets of South America, how he transitioned into being a family pet in Sweden. So this is just, again, a lovely type of read, definitely like a perfect one for book lovers, just an interesting story, and one I definitely recommend people pick up. And then for fiction books, I have loads of fiction books I would like to recommend. I've managed to narrow it down to just a few, and one of the ones I really want to top it is actually a children's book, and that is Because of Winn-Dixie. This is such a beautiful book. It's one of my favourite books. I actually regularly reread it because it's one of those books that just makes me smile. In this book, we're following a little girl who lives with her dad, who is a preacher. They've just moved to this new town. She's struggling a little bit to fit in, find her place. You know, she's a little bit lonely. She doesn't have many friends. And then one day she finds this dog like wreaking havoc in the local Winn-Dixie store. And someone is chasing after this dog and says, you know, who owns this dog? And she plucks up and says, this is my dog, and she ends up bringing the dog home. It's not so much that they adopt Winn-Dixie, but more so that Winn-Dixie adopts them. And through Winn-Dixie, Opal ends up meeting a bunch of different characters in her town, and it kind of ends up where a lot of lonely people are end up being brought together by this dog. And it's just a lovely story, really heartwarming. There's a lovely movie as well based on it, and one I definitely recommend if you want a shorter, sweeter read. This is just absolutely perfect. The books I want to recommend are some of my favourite fiction dog books, and this is W. Bruce Cameron's A Dog Purpose and also A Dog's Journey. There's actually a third book in this series now that I haven't read, that is actually one I really need to get to. In these books we were actually following a dog called Bailey, who like lives his life over and over again in the different breeds, like he has the same, he can remember all his like different memories, he can remember his like original favourite owner, and through all of his lives Bailey's kind of always trying to get back to his original owner. And we kind of see like just how different people treat dogs and the different types of services dogs provide for humans. In one of these in one of his lives, Bailey is a service dog, and you just see the type of companionship that dogs provide for humans, and at the same time how human beings are so pivotal and so important in a dog's life, that a dog's life, you know, it's like, I guess it's kind of like that saying is, I guess, that with something goes along the lines of like dogs are part of our life, but for dogs we're their whole life. And I feel like this is really poignant in this book, and again, this is a really gorgeous book. I love this because we're getting the story told by Bailey and through like a dog's voice, and this is definitely the type of voice I would imagine when I think about my dogs. I've read other books where I haven't really enjoyed the dog's voice at all, and it's kind of put me off the book, and I've rated that book quite low. Where these books, I just find that the way Bailey thinks and acts is definitely how I would like want a dog to think when I think about my dogs. This is how I would like their minds to work. W. Bruce Cameron also has another book called A Dog's Way Home. This is separate from A Dog's Purpose, and this one we're following Rosie, who is this type of bull terrier pit bull mix, and she ends up having trouble. Her owners end up having trouble when they keep being targeted, I think, by the local like dog warden, I guess, and he keeps saying that like it's illegal in their state to be able to own a dog like Rosie, even though it's not Rose, sorry, Bella. A dog like Bella, and they end up having to try and figure out how to rehome her. But Bella just wants to get home to her owners, to the people that she loves, and she ends up going across, like, I think at the mountains of Colorado wilderness to get back to her owner because she wants to be with him, and we just kind of follow her journey as well. This is also a movie I don't think I've watched it, but it's definitely one on my like Netflix like a watch later list, and it's definitely one I want to watch, but it's definitely an enjoyable book as well. Another one, again, W. Bruce Cameron just writes dogs really well. He writes dogs the way I think dogs think, so yeah. Another really great one to read is Call of the Wild by Jack London. This is a classic dog book, one of the classic dog books. Probably, I don't know whether it's one of the first books that really focus around dogs, but in this one we're following a dog who ends up being taken from his family home and brought to the Alaskan wilderness to work as a sled dog. He's stolen by bad people, and he ends up working as a sled dog in like the Alaskan wilderness, really tough conditions. And we see him work really hard for each owner that he has, also trying to find, like, you know, who like, I don't know, his heart owner would be, but he's also kind of feeling that call of the wild. Does he want to be a wild dog? Could he survive in the wild? And we're following him on that journey. Now this one, as I said, it's a classic book, and there is actually a few kind of upsetting scenes in this book around animal cruelty, dog death, things like that. So I would warn people about that as well just before they go into it, but definitely a really great book to read. It's one that really surprised me that I enjoyed it so much. And then for my TBR that I am going to try and read during the readathon is for my fiction book pick, and this kind of suits again for read a book with a dog on the cover, is Bertie the Blitz Dog by Libby Parker. This is a book that was gifted to me a few years ago by Kirsty over Kirsty's Reviews for my birthday, and I just have never got around to it, and it just sounds like just a really gorgeous book. This is obviously about a little dog called Bertie who ends up stranded in London during World War II. We see Bertie become a stray dog, I think, when his owner dies, and then he ends up befriending loads of different people, but he ends up finding this one little boy who he wants to be like his owner, and he decides that he's going to stick by this little boy and protect this little boy as much as he can, especially during this really, really dangerous time of the Blitz in London. It just sounds really, really cute, and I think it's just going to be a lovely, lovely read, and I'm really looking forward to it. Another book that I'm looking forward to reading is Lily and the Octopus. This is a book I put on my 5-star predictions at the start of this year, and I was really looking forward to reading it. And then obviously anyone who's been following my channel this past year knows that my dog Luna, she passed away in April, and it was a really, really tough time for us. Luna, she was just like the love of our lives, so losing her was just such a blow, and I was really struggling. I didn't really, not that I was struggling, but I just didn't want to. I was like, I would not be emotionally ready to read a book like Lily and the Octopus. You're following a dog called Lily who has something that her owner calls the octopus attached to her, that we know is probably something bad, and we follow their journey together as they try and fight this mysterious octopus. And yeah, I don't think, I probably would never be emotionally ready for this kind of book, but definitely I needed to give myself a little bit space from Luna. I wanted to get it read this year because I did put it on my 5-star predictions, so I'm hoping I'll be able to get to it during this readathon. Another book I want to read is actually the one behind me, which is this one, What the Dog Knows by Kat Warren. I actually just didn't want to take it off the shelf because I think it just looks really nice there, and I kind of like the dog like looking out at us. And this is a non-fiction book. This is going to be my non-fiction pick, and this one is basically just about, you know, how dogs see the world. It says in the cover it is scent, signs, and the amazing ways dogs perceive the world. So I think it's looking at actually how dogs' noses work, or like their senses in general, probably particularly their noses because they do have such a strong sense of smell, and just how dogs see the world. And I think not only will it be really, really interesting for me to read this, but also really, really beneficial as a dog owner. I think reading books like this and understanding more about how our dogs' minds work, how their senses work, how they take in the world, can only benefit us in helping them survive the world and helping them, you know, step by step through the world. And yeah, I'm always up for learning ways to help my dogs adapt to the world that, you know, is built for humans and is very, very scary world for dogs. So any way I can understand them more is just a real plus for me. And then another book I want to read is Following Atticus by Tom Ryan. This is also a non-fiction book, and in this book we are following a man, Tom Ryan, who ends up deciding to take on this challenge with his dog Atticus, where they are climbing up every single peak in the city they live. I think it's Massachusetts, and I think it's like 48 different peaks. They decide to take on this like fitness mountain challenge, and I think this is just his documenting that journey with his little dog, and how I guess his dog probably became his lifeline during this challenge and really helped him push on and hopefully complete it. I don't know if they completed it. I presume they did, but I will see when I read this book. So those are books I would recommend people to read. Those are also the books that I want to read during the readathon. I hope there are some picks there for everyone. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books, if you want to pick them up now after I've talked about them, or indeed if you have any books that you would really recommend people to read about dogs. I would definitely love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time.